Have him. So today we are going to be, well, talking to James about how you became one of the best poker players in the world and also what you're going to be teaching everyone at PokerCoaching.com. Before we get started, if you all are here in the chat, type something so I know that you're here and so that I know this is functioning properly. So, we'll hop right into it, James. What is your background and generally, how did you get into poker?
Okay, cool. Really excited to be here, first of all. I've been looking at your products for a long time. I like following you, and I am really happy to be working with you and working with your group.
Well, thank you.
So
Also,
a
I'm
little
glad that
bit,
you are here. I really don't bring on all that many coaches, but I like playing with you. You're tough to play against, and anyone who is crushing the games, who is nice, I like to have them.
yeah. And I'm good friends with Faraz and the other Jonathan, and yeah, this should be fun.
Awesome. Perfect. So, how did you become you?
Okay, so a little bit about myself. I grew up in California and Oregon. I went to school for business at the University of Oregon. Have a degree in business and marketing. And I started playing poker when I was in college and really, really liked it. So right after college, I moved to Vegas to play live, and then I played online there as well. I went to Mexico for a year. I went to the mountains in Colorado for 6 months, all playing online poker. Basically bounced around a bunch of places. I went to Costa Rica for 3 years. Yeah, I've made a lot of friends along the way, had a great time. I've had horses, I've coached stables, I've been coached. I study a lot. Yeah.
Excellent.
Ha-
So, it sounds like you took poker very seriously. It sounds like you didn't really like dabble in it. It sounds like you just kind of jumped in hardcore, right?
Yeah, from the very beginning, like everything else I was doing, I took everything pretty seriously and studied. To learn poker, it wasn't I didn't learn through friends. I was just watching videos every day on card runners. Watched a lot of Timex and studied with the calculators. I take a mathematical approach to most things in life. I come from a mathematical background. Both my parents were in finance, and I like numbers, and it's always came easy to me. So that's the kind of approach that I took with poker, and I did well from the beginning.
Awesome. Well, you all may hear my kids crying throughout this webinar. Go figure. Turns out that's what happens whenever we're all locked down. So, such as lives are if you hear all of them throughout this. So, speaking of like a general GTO background, do you spend a lot of time working with various program solvers, etc., as opposed to just like getting in there and gambling?
Absolutely. Ever since solvers started to come out, I've been obsessed with learning about them. I think I studied them too much at the beginning. So now I'm kind of working in a through using some different techniques. But yeah, as far as GTO background, for PIO for like 2 years straight, I studied PIO while I was playing online to get an understanding of the program when it first came out. I was one of the early adopters, and yeah, I think it's a great program. Munker Solver, I get private coaching with Munker Solver. I create sims to find pre-flop solutions and post-flop solutions. I've studied all the other smaller ones like Snowy, HRC, and ICMizer. Snowy is a pretty user-friendly, simple one. HRC is for ICM, and then ICMizer is kind of an outdated ICM calculator. I was at the beginning of my career, I was playing sit and goes. So ICM was kind of more important. And then I went into tournaments, so I kind of phased out a little bit of the ICM stuff.
So,
But I have a
also,
strong understanding.
you mentioned that you studied solvers too much in the beginning, you think. Why? What do you mean by that? Because nowadays it seems like people are either in their minds very much GTO or very much not GTO. But I mean, I think you need to know both to some extent. And What do you mean by you were too much in the beginning?
So when you first start studying stuff like PIO, what you think that you should do is try to imitate the program exactly. And what happens when you do that is you get your overall game develops more holes than it had before because of how complex the solutions are. So the idea with studying PIO is that you want to understand why the solver is doing things generally, and you want to pull general theory from the programs. But if you're studying solutions and you're trying to play exactly like the program would play, you end up just making a lot of mistakes. And that's why you see a lot of live players doing really well today who, there's some live players who don't have any PIO background and are crushing the highest stakes, because your general understanding of poker theory is much more important than trying to find exact solutions in every spot. And yeah, we see tons of examples of that, today.
I mean, just
Most
last
notably,
night,
Bryn Kenny, there you go.
Yeah, just last night, some of my friends were texting me about this app that tries to teach you to play GTO, and I'm like, this is just not all that useful for high stakes or for poker tournaments, because there are payout implications right off the bat, right? Like in tournaments, you probably don't want to just straight up play as if there are no payout implications. And also,
yeah, I mean that's one of the reasons. Yeah.
Also, your opponents aren't going to be playing the pre-flop GTO strategy that a lot of the solvers assume they will be playing necessarily, right?
Right, we're playing against humans, and GTO strategy is built to play best against other GTO strategies. The implementation is it's very difficult and not practical. So I think it's best to maybe have a coach. If you're going to be playing part-time, I think it's best to have a coach that has studied GTO and then just basically tells you the things that you need to know about it generally, rather than trying to understand the specifics.
Okay, good. I mean, that said, you probably do need to understand how to properly adjust, right? And then, solvers
adjusting is the most
that,
important part. And you can go in PIO, you can make adjustments for your opponent's strategies. And small change is, if you go in and adjust your opponent's range, small changes in your opponent's range makes your strategy like blow up with differences. So like for instance, if someone calls the river too much, if your opponent is calling the river too much, and maybe they're calling the river 70% when they're supposed to be calling 60%, like that 10% change in their strategy makes our strategy shed like almost all of our bluffs into checks, almost every single combo. So understanding how your opponent is going to play generally and how humans play is going to be much more important than understanding all of the GTO solutions. Excellent.
And well, you clearly have a lot of tournament earnings. We have 4.7 million in live earnings, also a bunch online. And how did you go from? Because I mean, a lot of these have came over just the last few years, right?
Yes. After Costa Rica, I just moved to Vegas and decided I was going to start playing live poker.
That easy, huh?
Yeah, well, you put your time into something and you'll get results eventually. So, the 50, 40 hours a week I was playing live poker, I just said I was going to put into MTTs live because I like the industry more. Yeah, so I work pretty hard. I play a lot. I fly around a lot.
Would you generally recommend that a lot of people who want to get experience, especially now that a lot of people are kind of in lockdown mode or have more free time that they have more free time than they normally would, they should probably spend some of that time grinding online poker and getting a lot of experience, right?
Yeah, I would say like a study ratio of 50% study, 50% play when you're an intermediate player is probably optimal. And yeah, you can get a lot of experience online. I think when you're focused, you're playing a lot of games every day. You're going to end up like at nighttime after your sessions, you're going to be thinking about like, what can I do better? How can I improve my game? What are some spots that I missed? And when your mind is constantly focused on these things, you show up the next day, you make the adjustments. Now your game is better and you're thinking about new things. In fact, to develop habits to become a better player and play better, I would write down my thoughts at night and like new habits I wanted to develop. Maybe I'm raising to 2.5x instead of 2x. Small things. You write those down, you make the changes in your game. Now you're doing that every day naturally, and you can work on the next thing you want to, the next thing you want to do. Maybe you want to bluff turns more. Maybe you want to size bigger on rivers. Maybe you want to be more active in late position battles.
Excellent. I mean, that's something I've actually done for a long time. Whenever I would be playing poker, I would anytime I ran into a problem, like someone was giving me a difficulty by maybe they were being too aggressive, or They always caught my bluffs appropriately, I would always write that down in my phone, and I would go home and study it at night. And doing that over and over and over and over again, eventually you'll plug a lot of your leaks.
Yeah, it becomes part of your game. Like when I show up to tournaments now, it's very easy for me. I don't have to think about a lot of spots. It's basically like a routine. I know what I'm doing, and it's more casual.
Excellent.
And it makes the game more fun. Then you make more money. So yeah.
It turns out winning and making more money makes the game more fun. Who'd have thought, right?
Way more fun, yeah.
So I see here you have written down on your background, expansive high-stakes network and high-stakes trading. What does that mean?
Okay, so for high-stakes network, so I study a lot, and I work with my friends when I study, and I might study for a day or like maybe 5 hours, and I'll find like one or two good pieces of information, like takeaways that I can tell my friends about, right? So I'll communicate with them these takeaways and these thoughts. It might take them 20 seconds to read or 15 seconds to read, but it might save them, 4 hours of looking through study material to find it. So while studying, I just took really good notes and developed basic, easily communicatable ideas. And I would write them down or make a note card or presentation slide and send them to all of my friends, right? So I'm adding value to their life, saving them time, making them more money, making them better at poker. And eventually when you develop these friendships of people you're seeing at live events or you met online, etc., when those get more matured, they're going to start doing the same thing for you. And that's what I have right now. I have like maybe 100 people in my phone that I can talk strategy with, that we're exchanging information and we're, bouncing ideas off of each other and we're getting better. I think you see this in like a corporate setting as well. Just like, teamwork and synergy makes problems easier and is good for everyone involved.
Excellent. And if anyone has any questions, by the way, feel free to type them in. We'll be asking James whatever questions you have at the end of this webinar. So if you have questions, either hold them till then or feel free to type them in. And if they're relevant right now, I may ask them. So, well, I think a lot of people view poker as a very individual game. They think, I'm going to go and study and I'm going to play poker. But in reality, it's kind of a team game to some extent where you develop relationships, like you said. And that's very, very powerful. I mean, whenever I first started, I was lucky to find a really, really good group of poker players. And now many of them are the absolute best players in the world. And it's just, maybe lucky that I happen to get in the right group, but you also just learn a ton. And now we're here to share it with all of you. So what is high stakes trading?
So basically to help with this high stakes network of people I talk strategy with, I'm also doing high stakes trading where I move about $1.5 million a month to different poker players' wallets. I help them have the money that they need to play on different sites or play live, move money through Bitcoin to play in different countries. So I'm facilitating these trades, and basically the value that would bring to you as an audience is that I'm in contact and talking to the highest stake winning players. I'm good friends with these people. We talk a lot about poker. I'm learning about the newest programs. I'm learning about the newest strategies, where the games are good. I have a good oversight of the industry, and I can help, your viewers with this information.
Awesome. Well, they're our viewers now, so we're doing it together. So you have, I believe, 5 parts of your initial training material we're going to be discussing at PokerCoaching.com laid out here. So let's go through that. So part 1, pre-flop fundamentals. Do you think people play well before the flop? Because I can tell you, everyone thinks pre-flop is easy and they all play great.
Yeah. So basically, over the next like 12 months, right, I'm going to be doing like 1 webinar a month, and I'm going to try to go over, the most important parts of the game that will make you guys the most money. And I've broken this down into 5 parts: pre-flop, post-flop, micro, macro, and database review and HUDs. So for this first part, obviously pre-flop, we're going to be looking at different solutions from different programs and, which ones are the best, the EVs of decision making. So we're going to be, I don't know if you guys are familiar with BBs per 100 or win rate, but we're going to be looking at all the different decisions we can make pre-flop and post-flop and what kind of effect those decisions will have on win rate. So not only is it important for people to be making the correct moves in poker, but I think everyone should know generally how much EV or expected value this is generating us as a player. If you have queen jack offsuit in the cutoff, and how much is raising worth, how much is folding worth, how important are these decisions? The reason why I think that everyone should know the EVs of all these different types of decisions is because every time you make an aggressive or passive decision, the other 8 people at your table are watching you and they're judging how you're playing based on these actions. So I think that we should try to make effective decisions, taking aggressive action when we're rewarded the most, and vice versa. So understanding, maybe you raise the last 5 hands in the row, you have ace-6 suited under the gun, and the pre-flop solutions are saying you should raise. Like, let's just look at the EV of what happens if you fold, So understanding all these different values and all the spots is what I'm going to be teaching. Adaptation, basically where we're going to deviate from the rigid pre-flop solutions. If we have a whale at the table who VPIPs 40, what happens to a button 3-bet range, etc. If there's 3 recreational players at the table, 6 pros, how does that change our 3-betting strategy and why? Live poker especially is, it's really important to adapt. And so yeah, we're going to go over that. Programs. Poker Snowy is going to be the best one for pre-flop, but I have solutions and I know how the other ones work, and I can show you the pros and the cons for different programs, and then obviously just simply the differences in pre-flop fundamentals for cash and MTT and why.
Awesome. So what are, like, say you do show up to a random $500 tournament somewhere, and it's a relatively soft tournament. What general adaptations would you make right off the bat, assuming you show up and you don't know anyone at the table?
So for pre-flop, you can do a lot of things pre-flop without losing much EV. So at the beginning of a $500 tournament, I'm playing tight. Like that's a quick and easy adaptation because we know that they're not going to be overfolding post-flop or they're not going to be overfolding pre-flop, so our opens are generating less EV. We're going to get more multi-way pots, so generally we want a stronger range. Yeah.
All right, cool.
And here's an example. Like if middle position raises and we're on the button with a hand with a lot of hands, like let's say a hand with like ace-6 suited, right? The EVs of flatting, 3-betting, and folding are all very similar.
Okay.
Right. So basically, I want to show like your audience why we could choose any 3 of these options and what's that going to do for our win rate. And that's like in our industry right now, generally people, even high stakes players will say, oh, you need to 3-bet this hand. That's 100% 3-bet, or they'll say you need to 3-bet this 75% of the time, call it 25% of the time. And I think that's like being so precise pre-flop is just kind of an error. And I can show you guys like, things that you can do to make more win rate by adjusting.
All right, excellent. And I think a lot of people approach cash games and tournaments very differently in general, or they approach them exactly the same. Like you'll see some players who do just a whole lot of open limping in cash games for whatever reason, or like no 3-betting. But then you'll see them in tournaments and they always 3-bet or fold. And it's interesting how people play the games either incredibly differently or very, very similarly. What differences are there in your mind? Very briefly.
What differences in
Between cash games and tournaments? Let's talk about early levels when you're playing kind of deep stacked.
Okay, so sizing and hand selection is going to be the two big ones. Your sizing is going to be larger in cash games, and you're using different ranges. Tournaments is like a more high card game, and deep stack cash you want more hands that will that can make big hands in triple barrel pots, or straights and suited connectors have a lot more value. I mean, that's the easiest, most obvious one. And the 3-bets move from 2.6x re-raises to 4x in cash games. In tournaments, your standard sizing for like 60 big blinds and below is 2.6x 3-bet. And then deeper stacked, you go up to 4x. Gotcha. And it's with different ranges. The VPIP PFR 3-bet is about the same, but you're just using different hand combos.
Yeah, that's something a lot of people don't necessarily understand as well, is that you can play, let's say, 17% of hands from a spot, but you can play a different 17% of hands in different scenarios or against different opponents. So that is...
Right. And the reason that difference is there is because there's a lot bigger bet sizing post-flop when you're deep stacked. You can, just in general, maybe you're betting 100% to 130% in a lot of spots post-flop. Deep stack, whereas MTT's average bet sizing turn and river might be like 80%.
Well, speaking of post flop, you have here that you're going to be discussing exploitative theory with real pool data. What exactly does that mean?
Okay, so I have a background in Poker Tracker 4, Hold'em Manager 3, and Hand to Note. And for years, I've been collecting hand histories and putting them in my computer, getting very large samples, and basically looking at how populations play. And this is, I think, way more important than understanding like GTO in a lot of spots. So real pool data, the Poker Tracker 4 and Hold'em Manager have been used for years, and they have like general pool tendencies for, population over maybe like 20 different nodes. And this new program, Hand to Note, uses the same data, but gives us information instead of on 20 different nodes, it might give us information on like 200 different nodes of the tree. And when I say node, I mean like one node would be population fold to turn bet, or population fold to river bet. Those would each be nodes. So with Hand to Note, it came out about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. And I've been putting all my time there for like the last 6 months. And we can break down, instead of saying, how often does a pool fold to a turn bet, we can say, how often does pool fold to a turn bet when pre-flop action went XYZ, the board is XYZ, the bet sequence on the flop was XYZ, the player type is XYZ. We can sort the data in a much more effective way to study the game like it hasn't been studied before.
Do you want to give everyone one spot right now, off the top of your head, where they could make some sort of, broad general play that would be very, very profitable that they are perhaps not doing today?
Yeah, sure. So, example, we defend the big blind. We're defending the big blind in two different spots. The first spot is an early position raiser, and the second spot would be a button raise.
Okay. So this is when
So
either early position raises and we call the big blind, or the button raises and we call the big blind. How deep are we, roughly?
we're 60 big blinds deep.
Okay.
Most of my studies is for tournaments. Average tournament stack was going to be about 60 big blinds. So scenario one, we have early position raising and triple barreling on king, queen, jack for large sizing.
So they bet the flop, bet the turn, and bet the river for a big size.
Yeah, triple barrel, yeah.
Okay.
And we have a bluff catcher, and we're deciding whether or not to hero call river.
A bluff catcher in this spot's essentially a king,
queen,
or
10, queen, yeah, just a pair.
Okay.
Any pair will do. Okay. Situation two, we have button raising, action checks to the river. The board is low cards, 1 over card. River card is an ace. And we're, deciding whether or not to bluff catch with a pair, like a 5, let's say. Let's say the board runs out 4, 5, 6, 10, ace.
Okay. So 2 different bluff catching scenarios.
2 different bluff catching scenarios, right? So the hand to note data will show us that the river composition for scenario 1 for the early position player is going to be so value heavy that we should fold almost every bluff catcher. Fold king 10, fold ace king to a large sizing, right?
So just so everyone is very clear on what we're talking about. Under the gun raises, we call with king 10. Flop comes king, queen, jack. We check. They bet kind of big. We call. Turns whatever. We check. They bet kind of big. We call. On the river, we check. We should probably be folding out the king 10, even though it's a pretty good hand. They just aren't bluffing all that often because in reality, they don't have all that many bluff combinations, presumably. And also, they probably aren't bluffing with all of them because they know you have something, right?
Right. And, GTO solvers will say, okay, for pot size bet on the river, we might have to defend 50% of our range. King 10 is high up in our range in value, and it blocks ace 10 and 10-9 suited. So, we have to call with this hand or we're going to be exploited by large amounts. And then conversely, we look at situation 2, button raises and button raises and action checks to the river. We're going to see this spot by button hyper overbluffed. So you can call with almost any pair very profitably.
So that's when it is 6-5-4. It goes check, check. Turn is a 10. It goes check, check. River's an ace. We check. They bet. It's a good bluff spot, right? Well, in theory, it looks like a good bluff spot.
In theory, it is a good bluff spot, which is probably why we see so much bluffing here, because generally speaking, the big blind's overfolding. The ace river card is good, quote unquote, good for the button's range. So, I do think it's a good bluff spot, and air combos will be making a large percentage of the pot by betting if you're a button. But as a counter from the big blind, this is going to be a great spot to call with any pair, and you're going to be making significant pot share. I think that, if button were to bet half pot on the river, he's supposed to have only 25% bluffs, and I would say in this spot he might have close to 35% bluffs, which doesn't sound like a lot, but if you run the maths, that means with any pair by hero calling, you're making about 20% pot share, which is huge.
Excellent. So good. And that's all stuff you learn by looking at the data and seeing what people actually do in the real world. So let's talk about micro strategies. What do you mean by micro strategies?
Okay, this is just general strategies that I think will improve win rate the fastest and make people the most money by learning first. So tree simplifications, where it's important to have a variety of betting strategies post-flop and where you can simplify. Most notably will be the flop. There's a lot of things that you can do when you have a range advantage and heads up pots to simplify the game tree. Most important one is basically just like a high frequency, small bet size. in heads up pots as the preflop aggressor. That's an example of a tree simplification. Quick example, you just raise the button, big blind defends. On any flop in the, any possible flop, the button can bet 30% pot at 100% frequency and not lose any EV, which is, so I'm just basically going to show a bunch of simplifications over the different, over the game tree to bring you guys closer to GTO quickly.
Do you think that, well, so some people will say that you need to, in these spots, perhaps blindly follow GTO, but in reality, it's very hard to implement to some extent. Like, even if spots are bet a lot, they're still checked some tiny portion of the time. And essentially you're saying, if you're supposed to bet 90% of your range, you should probably just bet all of the range, and makes your life way easier, and probably it's going to be almost as good, right?
Yeah. You can test simplifications in PIO. So this stuff is all GTO approved. And I mean, you can have mixed strategies and simplified strategies that are both GTO approved, and going both ways is fine. And by the way, when I say simplifying strategies, I don't necessarily mean that that's always how we're going to play, but an understanding of tree simplifications will help you with your overall game. Like if in this exact spot where we raise button and big blind calls, and I'm saying you can bet 100% of range for a small sizing, I'm not necessarily saying you should do that. I'm saying that we should know that you can do that. If we're against, a drunk guy that's all in on every river, maybe I want to check back top set on the flop. I think that's, or check back middle pair and just plan on calling two. So I'm not saying that, we should always follow GTO or simplified strategies, but it's just good to know.
All right, cool. Well, something else I think a lot of people will be interested in is the effective player profiling, because people ask me all the time, like, how do you make reads on players at the table quickly? Because, like, if I sit down at a poker table, I kind of already have an idea, or at least an assumption of how a lot of people will play based on perhaps the first three hands they play, or maybe even the way they look or talk or act at the table, right?
Yeah, so this is coming from, a lot of this is coming from hand to note as well. But basically you can sort by different player types, and we can sort player types based on what they're doing pre-flop is usually the best indicator of how a player is playing overall. And then based on how a player is playing pre-flop, we can look at how we can expect them to play post-flop. Like generally speaking, examples here, pre-flop, tighter players will have stronger ranges when they bet, and also are overfolding more post-flop. We have some data showing us that high stakes players in general in tournaments are overfolding flop and turn, and recreational players that VPIP wider pre-flop are calling more flop and turn. So yeah, it's easy player profiling.
And you have here behavior at live events. What do you mean by this?
So these are things that will make poker a better experience for you as a player, more fun and more profitable. These are just things like how you should carry yourself at live events, how you should, if you should be talking in a lot at the table, if you should be friendly with the people around you, the benefits of creating friends. Like poker's, what people don't understand when they first start playing live or MTTs is that poker is kind of like a small community and everyone knows each other. So it's important to have to be amicable, to show up dressed well, to play fast, to be nice to the other recreational players at the table, just like generally going out of your way to be friendly. It will make a better experience for you for that, that specific day or month, and then also in the future, you're probably going to be seeing these people for years, and if you have a better like network in the community, it's going to be more fun to show up for work or more fun to show up to do your hobby. So it's just simple stuff like that.
For sure. I always wonder how some of these people who are like, kind of scam a bunch of people and then show up to the poker tournament where they have, kind of screwed over a person at every table. Like, man, what kind of life must that be? You do not want that life, I am sure. You'd much rather everyone like you and want to help you in whatever way they can.
Eventually, I think you would just end up like not showing up anymore. Sounds miserable.
Yeah, you'd much rather things not be miserable. I mean, some people really do take the approach of poker where they like want to fight with everybody. Or maybe it's like some weird machismo thing. I'm not exactly sure. But like, if anything, I'm trying to cooperate and be nice to everyone and have a good experience.
They might have issues seeing like the bigger picture. Like how is this going to affect, my experience a year from now or 2 years from now?
Yeah, but like it doesn't even gain him any EV that day, like in my mind. I mean, I guess I could understand it if it made this day significantly more profitable or something, but I don't even think it does that. It just makes people not like you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you want people to like you. It's good life advice. You'd rather people like you than not like you. All right, so macro strategies. What's the difference between a micro and a macro strategy for those who are unfamiliar with that?
So this would be like more broad, an overview of poker in general, our industry, basically a bigger, just like a zoomed out look of poker as on a worldwide level and long-term level.
Okay, and so here we have hobby implications, because a lot of people think that poker players are just robots and all they do is play poker all day, every day. And that's maybe true some portion of the time, but we'll talk about your brief ideas on hobbies and what they mean for you as a poker player.
Poker offers like this unique chance to be traveling the world if you get good. So a lot of recreational players are just playing locally in their casino, but there's a large world outside of that in our industry. And if you get good at poker and you can make a nice hourly wage, you can further increase that by traveling. So not only are you traveling, but you're getting paid to travel. And this is, a really cool idea for hobbyists, basically. You can travel to any European countries. You can go to Asia. You can, South America. So there's a lot of implications if you get good at poker, and if you get good at your hobby, you can live a cool lifestyle.
Excellent. What do you mean by location analysis here?
So based on the game type that you're playing, there's going to be certain cities that are going to be more profitable to play or be centered around. Cash games might be really good on the West Coast right now. So basically looking at this different stakes and different games available, for no limit, or tournaments, or, even mixed games. I have a small understanding. Looking at how games are in Macau. I go to all of these places every year, several times, so I think I can provide some information, based on what people are looking for, to find good games.
For sure. I get questions very frequently from people who email me where they're considering becoming a pro. They're doing fine in their local region, and they ask me, like, basically, where should I go to maximize my potential win rate? And that really is something a lot of people just do not know because they're not out there traveling and doing things like you're doing, right? And
right.
You have better information than I do because I don't know anything about Macau, but that could be a great place to go to or a terrible place to go to. Or insert like anywhere else in the world, right? It could be amazing or bad, but you don't know unless you've done it. And having pros you can ask about this type of thing will be very, very beneficial for you, especially if you really are trying to make a giant life decision based on it. I mean, that said, you don't necessarily have to make a grand change. You can just get an Airbnb for a month and go there and enjoy the travel and see what it's like, right?
Yeah, there's cost of living, there's quality of living, are there things to do outside of the poker room? All of this stuff is very important.
Excellent.
Like Costa Rica has maybe only has up to live cash to 2.5, but maybe the living quality is so good you would want to go there and live for a summer.
For sure. I mean, and that's something that poker affords you, right? The ability to kind of go and do what you want within reason, and you've done a good job of it. You've been all around.
Yeah.
Excellent. So let's talk real quickly about database review and heads up displays. Well, I guess first things first. Do you not play on sites where you cannot use heads up displays? Because some of the sites are getting rid of them.
Yeah, right now mostly only playing on ACR, but yeah, sites are getting rid of them, but there's still ways to collect. I mean, legal ways and fine ways that sites still approve of for you to collect your own data and do analysis on yourself. Yeah, I would say like half of the sites, maybe a little bit more, 70% of the sites right now still use HUDs. So if that's something that you guys are interested in learning about, it's definitely going to help win rate. Specifically for the online sector, I have a lot of experience with HUDs and creating different HUDs based on what kind of information that you like.
Well, let's talk about self-analysis really quick, because a lot of people don't even really know what they should be looking at in their own stats. So, well, what should people be looking at? So imagine I've played online a little bit. Let's say we have 30,000 hands, not a ton, but like some, because we're a recreational player and we play once a week, and we've been doing it for 6 months. What should I even be looking at, or what should I care about, and how should I use that to make improvements?
So when you build a strategy, you basically you don't want others to be able to exploit your strategy too hard. You don't have to be too precise with this, especially if you play like a good amount of live poker, but you want to build a strategy that makes sense and other people won't be able to exploit. Like the most common strategy that's not working right now that a lot of people do is people leave their checking ranges too capped, so they end up just overfolding everywhere and betting all of their strength. So maybe their analysis and their online database, it would look like a lot of betting and a lot of overfolding. So just like creating just a general strategy so that you're pretty balanced in spots where, so if someone notices at the table that you're always doing one thing in one spot, they can't exploit you. And you can use the programs to do this type of self-analysis. It's pretty easy and quick.
Excellent. Interestingly enough, we have challenges at PokerCoaching.com, and one thing I'm always making sure people do is protect their checking range. It is so important, because if your checking range is garbage, all they have to do is bet and you lose. And you don't want to open yourself up to just easy aggression, right?
Yeah.
All right, so cool. So you're going to be making some content for PokerCoaching.com. You're going to be doing a webinar a month for the next year, maybe longer, we'll see. Your questions will be answered live in them, like we're about to do here. And also, you'll be making quizzes for Poker Coaching. I'm excited about that, and I'm excited to learn from you. Also, you do private coaching, so if people want to get a hold of you with that, how should they get a hold of you?
Yeah, just contact me on any social media account. I'll be picking up like 2 or 3 students right now because I have a little bit more time with the quarantine stuff.
Awesome. I mean, now is a great time. If you're stuck at home with, quote unquote, nothing to do, you might as well use the time and not squander it. So let me tell everyone about a sale we're going to have going on really quick, and then we're going to answer some of your questions, so make sure you type them in. We have the spring sale going on at PokerCoaching.com. It ends on April 12th, 2020. We have lots and lots of coaches. We've just picked up James as well, so I'm very, very happy about that. Like you said, some of your friends, Faraz Jaka, Michael Acevedo, Jonathan Jaffe, they are there, and I basically try to hire people who I want to learn from. And so I'm happy to have a great team. At Poker Coaching, we have lots and lots of quizzes, over 800 of them at the moment, and more being added all the time. We also have webinars and classes with the pros where they answer, well, the things that they are best in the world at, and also they answer your questions to help you become the best poker player you can be. So head over to pokercoaching.com/spring sale and check that out. So we have a few questions typed in, James. What are some of the most challenging adjustments you made transitioning from online to live? Because that's something a lot of people deal with, especially if they started off playing for tiny stakes online, but they grinded up their money and they want to be able to play bigger buy-ins against softer opponents. So what are some adjustments that you've had to make?
So 2 things, understanding the change in player pool and using different information to your advantage. So the first thing is understanding the player pool. You get a lot more recreationals playing live, and recreationals play a lot differently than your average online player. So understanding how the recreational was playing, this is before I had a lot of player profile data, was a big change. Second thing was understanding the data that you have, or the information that you have, and how to adapt to it. Online, it's a game of statistical information. Unfortunately, there's so much information with HUDs and databases and stuff like that. You have to break down all of your opponents that you see daily and try to exploit them on a technical, basically on an advanced technical level. And when you're playing live, it's more important for you to understand generally how you're seen, what your image is over a short period of time. You play with like a lot of different random players. So yeah.
It's important to be aware of what people think of you. And, your image may be very different than mine, or very different from James's image, right? And like, I know that some people view me differently than other people view me. And that's important to recognize. And it could be based on your appearance. It could be based on the last 20 hands you played at the table, right? If you just get hit by the deck and you play, 10 out of the last 20 hands, they're going to think you're a lunatic, whether or not you actually are, right? And that's important to recognize. And then you have to ask, will they even adjust because they think I'm a lunatic, or do they not care? So that's all important to make sure you try to figure out.
You're working with like 3 hours of information when you play live, 3 hours of live hands, which are really slow. And then online, you're working with, maybe a year of information with the same guy every day. Excellent.
So when you are transitioning from micro stakes up to the higher stakes, is there anything that you suggest up-and-coming players do? Because at the micro stakes, you may not even have to be all that good at poker to win if your opponents are equally terrible. But as you play higher and higher, you do have to eventually get good. So how would you suggest players today devote some of their studying time to get good as quickly as reasonably possible?
At the highest stakes, you probably want more of an understanding of solvers. So that means getting private coaching with people who understand solvers. And at the that's the most important thing. And at the lower stakes, it's more about just exploiting opponents that you're not going to see that frequently. So studying the different training sites, studying your content is going to be, the best for almost anything in the world that you want to get better at. Studying is the most important. So
I would definitely reiterate the idea of hiring a private coach. I realize that private coaching is expensive, especially from many of the absolute best players. That's why I made PokerCoaching.com and made it at an accessible price for most people. But private coaching is very, very beneficial, and I would definitely suggest you all talk to James or some of the other coaches at PokerCoaching.com if you want private coaching. Speaking of stats and whatnot, do you use SharkScope, and do you think you should opt out / stay hidden on SharkScope or the other various tracking programs that will come in the future?
Yeah, I love SharkScope. I use it all the time. I don't think it matters too much to opt in or opt out, but I would definitely get a subscription there and use it to understand variance and understand your own win rate and the players that you're playing with, the ability of the players that you're playing with. I think it's a great tool. And I've been using it every day while playing online over the past 3 weeks.
So you mentioned understanding variance. What do most people not understand about variance?
Swings in tournaments versus cash games are insane. And when people go on heaters in tournaments, I think generally speaking, they just play way too high and end up, losing a lot of their bankroll. So if the better you can understand variance, the more success you're going to have in poker. And seeing the graphs on SharkScope will help you out with this, especially if you filter by buy-in or field size. I use those filters a lot on SharkScope.
Yeah, I was watching Michael Acevedo stream the last few days, and every day he made a final table, but he would just get to the final table and then run into a flip or run into a cooler and lose and take a bunch of 9th, 10th, 11th places. And that results in, break-even sessions or slight losing sessions. Whereas you run a little bit hotter, you just win a load of money. And it's important to recognize that. Do you think that you have a good mental game and that you're generally unfazed by the swings? And do you think learning about variance helps with that?
Learning about variance for sure helps with that. Personally, my mental game I feel is good, and that's because I think I have my life in order generally. I have good relationships with my people and my family, and I have a pretty stress-free life. I'm young, and yeah, I have everything in shape. So yeah, I think I have a good mental game, and I think mental game in general. I think one of the biggest things is just being financially prepared for the stakes that you're at, and your mental game will be much less affected.
For sure. I mean, you see a lot of people, especially at the smaller stakes live games, where they have $1,000 tournament once a month at their casino, and it's like the cool thing to do to go play it because all their friends are playing it. Yet they only have $3,000 to their name, and they think, well, I have to play this $1,000 tournament to be cool. And then they play it and they bust and they lose, and I mean, they're devastated. And I mean, I guess to be fair, if I lost a third of my money in one game, I'd be devastated as well. So yeah, you need to make sure you are properly bankrolled and understand what you're signing up for. And I guess I'm always surprised about how people just are completely oblivious to what they are signing up for, especially in like big field tournaments, like you said, right? If you're playing a tournament with 1,000 people, you're just not going to win it all that
Right.
often.
Yeah. So I mean, it is interesting. Like the best thing you can do for mental game is just bankroll management, which is not even really a mental game topic.
All right. Have you ever had a real job before poker?
Not really, no.
That's lucky.
I mean, I've had little stuff when I was younger, but it's almost irrelevant. We're talking about like minimum wage jobs.
Yeah, and
Refereeing soccer. I managed a Quiznos.
that's a real job. Managing a Quiznos is amazing.
Maybe okay. I made like $12 an hour or whatever. Oh, I used to flip cars. I used to buy and sell cars a lot in high school.
What's the secret to flipping cars?
Uh, Presentation. I mean, advertisement. These guys would put up bad ads on Craigslist, and their cars would be dirty, and a couple things would be broken.
And
So
so you buy it cheap, and then you put a few $100s into it.
fix it
You
up,
wash it.
make the mark. Yeah, be an easy salesperson. Show up with cash.
Nice.
When I was buying cars, like everybody else had to get financed or take the seller to the bank. I would just show up with money in my hand. Like I just sign the paper and we're done. Make it easy. No one wants to deal with that stuff.
It is true. It turns out if you just help people out, give them what they want, and make it easy on them, things will go smoothly for you. If you're difficult to deal with and make it a pain for them, they may not want to deal with you, and things won't go as well for you. And that's carried over. It's funny how these lessons you learn from like early in life carry over to what you're doing today, right?
Yeah, it's much better to learn that stuff on the streets than in the book. You get a true understanding for business.
Excellent. Well, we're getting near the end of this webinar. If anyone else has any questions, feel free to type them in. Do you meditate or anything like
I
that?
meditate. No, but I have a lot of friends who do it. So I can't really speak too much on it.
I have attempted to meditate quite a few times, and I'm just not a fan. I don't enjoy it. I don't know. It's like nice, but I don't think it's mandatory for me yet. Like brushing my teeth is mandatory, or
Sure.
working out a little bit is mandatory. And I think if you get to the point where it's mandatory, you need it. But it's nice to sit there and quiet your mind. One thing I think from talking to a lot of my friends who meditate some is that they have just a lot of nonsense going on in their life otherwise. And I just try to keep it nice and clean. Before I play poker tournaments, I get all of my life stuff off of my plate so that I can go there and only just focus on poker. And I think having a clear mind just in general is highly beneficial.
Yeah, I always feel a lot better after I get my back end organized, like my finances, all my accounting. The more my life is generally organized, the better I feel on a day-to-day basis. So that's my thing. But a lot of my friends are into meditating. I can't speak too much about it. Really smart friends do it a lot. So
Awesome. My kids are banging on the door. They're saying, "Daddy, come on, man, it's time to go." What have you been doing while we've been locked down on quarantine? Just grinding a bunch?
playing ACR a lot, party poker some natural 8. I've been trading a lot. Yeah.
Nice. Working. Do you think hand to note is significantly better than perhaps just a heads up display? Like, is it worth investing in something like that if you are trying to take poker seriously? Or if you're just getting started, should people be doing something different?
No, I would not invest in hand to note, just because it's so complicated to use and get the right outputs. I would not buy it. I would just listen to people or hire coaches that have used it. That's going to be the most effective shortcut.
One thing I learned a long time ago is that it's very, very often way more effective, and also takes way less time just to hire someone to teach you the stuff that they have spent years of their life learning. And so anytime I go to learn a new game, like if I want to learn Pot Limit Omaha, I hired a coach, or learn Heads Up No Limit Hold'em, I hired a coach, right? And
yeah, I have plenty of coaches that I go to. I mean, I had a hand to note session 2 days ago because I still don't know how to do this stuff, but I know how to read the outputs the best.
Well, there you go. And we have essentially consolidated all of my years of study and learning, all of James's, all of the other poker coaching coaches at PokerCoaching.com for you to study from. We've done all the hard work, and now we are presenting it to you in a way that is easy to master on your end. So check it out. Make good use of it at PokerCoaching.com/spring sale. James, do you have anything else you want to say today before we wrap it up?
No, that's it. Excited to be part of Poker Coaching.
Excellent.
Thanks for having me.
Where can people find you on Twitter, and what is your Twitter handle?
It's a little bit complicated. Maybe just search James Romero and you'll find me. I think just search James Romero on all the social media sites and you'll find me.
Why do you have a complicated Twitter name?
I created it years ago. I'm sorry.
Everyone has like a few relic social media accounts where it's just something absurd that doesn't even apply to poker, and it's just weird. Maybe it's lewd because you were a dumb teenager. Who knows?
No.
But yeah, awesome. So search James, find him. He does private coaching as well, looking to pick up a few students. If I was a young poker player and wanted to get good at poker, or an old poker player and wanted to get good at poker, I would hire James immediately, which is why I did at PokerCoaching.com for all of you. So make sure you make use of the resources we have available. All right, well, James, thank you very much for being here. I appreciate it. This was great, and excited to have you as part of the team.
All right, cool. Thanks for having me. Talk to you later.
Thank you very much. Good luck with everything.
All right.